I've been dealing with the Power Platform since the very beginning. And we've seen all the transformation between what was originally the Common Data Service version 1 to the Common Data Service version 2. And I'm coming from a Dynamics background as well. So I've been around for about 15 years in the business applications world. But I think here today, I'm not here to show you too much of a demo of what Dataverse can do for you, but it's more how you should use Dataverse to be successful. So Raz already did a very killer intro, but very quickly, I'm Kim. I'm part of the Dynamics team now in Canada, but formerly part of the Global Black Belt team in Europe. You can connect through LinkedIn. I'm passionate about everything business application and Power Platform. So if you want to share your experiences or learn a little bit from the community, absolutely do reach out on LinkedIn. So where did this session idea come from? I've been doing projects with clients, large and small, for many years. And many of those clients, they come to us after experimentation, after 6 months, a year, 2 years into their Power Platform experimentation. They say, hey, the Power Platform is great, but we kind of have difficulties to see the value when we compare to RAD, so rapid application development technologies, and or traditional development. We kind of don't find the right fit. And then every time we hear that, we're like, oh man, what's wrong with the product, or what's wrong with the approach? And when we dig deeper, we start to see some patterns that can explain why the ROI of their investment is lower than some of their clients that do have different behaviors. So let's dig a little deeper into this. What we're going to be covering throughout this session is going to be some of the challenges that affect typical low-code development. I'm going to speak a whole lot about the Power Platform, but it's also challenges with the Force.com platform and Mendix and OutSystems and other. So you have to think a little differently when speaking about low-code development. Then we're going to see how the Dataverse specifically makes things much better and even more faster and more reliable than any other technology available in other local platforms. We're going to look at how you can change your development approach. A small overview of the Dataverse, but again, I'm not going to dig too deep into the Dataverse. I'm not going to do a demo because I think the last session you were just on was amazing, guys. So thanks for doing the legwork for me here. And then we're going to look at different ways to when and when not to use Dataverse. So first challenges that we see. When we go to client, some of the challenges they bring back to us when they say, hey, I don't have ROI. The first one is, okay, what's your culture of innovation in your organization? This is not going to be a citizen developer session, but citizen development is indeed part of a solution that will generate much more ROI at scale in an organization. If you only use the Power Platform for traditional development, there are multiple ways to have good ROI. But if you enable citizen development, this scales up to much more, including citizen development around the Dataverse, not only around SharePoint or Excel spreadsheets. The second thing we hear a lot from our clients is that, low code is not enterprise grade. It's a toy. It's shadow IT. But the reality of the matter is, when you look at the different components of the Power Platform and our local platform, is, well, there's the Dataverse in there. If it wasn't scalable, we wouldn't have Dynamics 365 absolutely built on the Dataverse. This is the core component of Dynamics. These are large-scale, enterprise-grade solutions. But also when we think about model-driven apps and Power Apps, Canvas, and portals, this is enterprise-grade if you use it well. But if your definition of enterprise-grade is only do forms over data using Excel or SharePoint, yes, you might not feel that this is enterprise-grade. The third thing, low code sometimes takes longer than rapid application development or other traditional development approaches. And you know what? It's true. If you do it wrong, but if you do it right, it's actually much faster. And this is one of the other ways that we need to rewire our brains to think low code instead of traditional development using low code tools. And we're going to dig deeper into that. But the last point on those challenges that customer comes to us with is, hey, this is so expensive, right? So if I want Power Platform. I'm happy with what I have with Office 365 E3, E5, or whatever. Whenever we have a conversation about premium Power Apps, then they say it's way too expensive. Dataverse is too expensive. The premium connectors are too expensive. So where's the ROI? But we got some answers to all of those questions. The first one is that, hey, you need to allow more people to be actively involved in your digital transformation. Citizen development is absolutely an advantage here. But low code can serve both citizen and enterprise grade initiative. Low code can be faster than RAD in many types of projects if you choose the right approach. And low code TCO is generally lower when deployed and used at scale. What I mean by the last point is that if you ever only see one project into your entire organization for the foreseeable future, it's true that you might find low code to be more expensive than rapid application development. However, if you look at the application velocity that is required by modern organization, you will most likely build hundreds of apps every year. A huge chunk of them might come from citizen development, but you're still going to have 20 to a few hundred apps that you will build as a project. Then if you use low code to build those apps, those savings, they just pile up and pile up app after app because you share a common architecture and infrastructure to serve all of your projects, both citizen development and enterprise grade project. So how should we think differently? And no, this is not an Apple ad ripoff. It's think differently. It's different to maximize value with app development. So I don't know how many of you have worked in large development teams, but typically when you have a business user coming to you with, I have an idea, I have a need, whatever, the first thing you do typically is to say, all right, I'm going to design a user interface. I'm going to use the language I'm familiar with, Node.js, React, .NET, whatever you use, right? And then you're going to put all the business rules into that app. You're going to put some filtered views. You're going to have logic that applies at the UI layer. You're going to might do some calculation at the UI layer. So you're going to do all the design there because most of you in the real world are front-end developers. That's what you do, right? And then you're going to say, all right, but so we need to authenticate our users somehow, right? So then you go see middleware people that might have like a complete architecture of API services, microservices, or whatever that you can connect to, mostly to get Active Directory users. So you already built your app, then you're going to have some sort of a connection to an AD or another LDAP to say, hey, are you who you are? And what are the kind of databases you can see with that element? And then you will probably pass some parameters that coming from your filtered views that you built at the UI layer just to make sure that they can only see what they need to see. And ultimately, you will go to your backend developers and say, hey, I need a SQL database or NoSQL, whatever technology suits your needs. I'm going to say, I need a read-only and I need a read-write. And I need like admin mode. These are the three only roles I've ever going to use in my app. So I don't see you guys on camera, so I don't know if you're nodding or not, but this is typically what we see. And it works well. So if you use a front-end developer, some middleware people and back-end developers, or if you're a full-stack developer, this is typically how you think. That is the approach that doesn't fit well with low code. With low code, the way you should approach your project is from the ground up. You need to start with the data. In our case, you need to start with Dataverse because this is the best way to model your data with relational tables. It works well. Once that is done, it has much more than that. It has security at the core. So your role-based access control that is user-defined, entity-defined, field-defined is unmatched by anything else in the market. Or if you want to replicate that in SQL, it's going to take you weeks, if not months, just to match that alone. So by having that at the data layer, simplifies and secures your data like nothing else can do. But also you got your business rules. So all the calculations about certain fields will happen at the data layer. And all those business rules to say, hey, if I do this, then offer me those options, they happen at the data layer. The reason why this is important is that today you might think of an app, but tomorrow you might need to think of a second app for your back office users. You might need other interaction forms like a chatbot or a portal or a website. And if every time you have to put those business rules at the UI layer, it's going to take you forever for every project. But if you have all those rules at the Dataverse level, anything you're going to connect to it, even if it's not an experience, it might be only an API. So that role-based access control, those business rules are pervasive across all the experiences that you're going to have, and you cannot circumvent them. And there's also another important rule with that. Most of your database that you will deploy today outside of Dataverse, you might use SQL, NoSQL, whatever. Most likely they live in the cloud if you start from a new project. The thing with that, it's using a public cloud. So if the end user has access to that database through your app, he also has access directly to the database with only his credentials, assuming he knows the IP address he needs and he has some sort of a client to connect to, and those clients exist everywhere. It can be Excel. So if you put only your filtered views and your business rules and your role-based access control at the UI layer, if they can access that data from another provider, Microsoft or non-Microsoft, through the service directly, and they have access and read write, and you don't have filtered views, then they can do bad things with your data. They can do injections, mass exports, and stuff like that, putting your data at risk. Dataverse does not allow for that because all the business rules and role-based access control are at the data source. Then you can build some user interfaces. When you've done with your Dataverse, you've secured your data with role-based access control, you've made some views, forms, and everything, build your apps. This is the time, and you will spend much less time building apps if all the core important components are at the data layer. So we already touched some of those capabilities of the Dataverse, and I know in other sessions they did as well, but it's important that we look at some of those in details. Dataverse has a higher security and compliance standard than most of other databases that you might think about because it is encrypted by default and also offers you bring your own key. Not all web services databases will allow you to do that and or will be super complicated to implement those security and bring your own key and whatnot. The second thing with Dataverse is that it has this scalability at the core. So if today you have 100 users and tomorrow you have 10,000, what are you going to do? Go on Azure, on GCP every time and create more resources and then mess with billing, multiple environments and stuff like that? You don't have to do that. With the Dataverse, we already do that scalability for you by default, and it will expand or contract based on the users that use them. But not only that, we also take care for you all the backup aspect to it. So if business continuity plan is part of your language, you're going to simplify your life a lot more using Dataverse than trying to spawn, SQL or NoSQL databases in the cloud. Also, the governance and the support, that is an important part as well, because that data that flows between your app and your database, another database, needs to be secured somehow. You need governance. So you need to be able to put Purview somewhere to do that governance. And if you're not familiar with Purview, I strongly encourage you to look into what it is. That's probably going to be the major thing we're going to talk about next year. And Dataverse is coming to Purview. It's not there quite yet now, but it's something that we do there. So then you'll be able to have a full view of all the governance of the data across your organization, across SQL, SharePoint, Purview, and everything, and Dataverse and others. But also, the way that the Dataverse is built is compliant with Azure Active Directory security group. So if you have this security group say, these are our employees in Europe, these are our employees in Canada, By that, they can inherit the according security roles in your Dataverse instances and only see the data they should see. So this, again, shorten your development lifecycle a whole lot. We have instant provisioning. It takes literally 3 clicks to get Dataverse running, and about a minute later, you got everything. If you were trying to rebuild the Dataverse with SQL, it would take you months. It's only 3 clicks. So you have a SQL database that's there for your data. You have an Azure Blob Storage for your files and pictures. You got a Cosmos DB that is there for all your logging and auditing and everything. And then you have all the other capabilities that we mentioned earlier about redundancy, load balancing, search, indexing, and all of that stuff is done for you within 3 clicks. You can deploy in any geo you want. If you say, hey, for data residency purposes, I need to deploy that CRM instance or that Power Platform instance in Germany, guess what? You can. If you say, hey, that set of data needs to be in the US, well, you can. And it's easy to just share the metadata or your data model between those two things, but the underlying data will remain in those different geos. But not only different geos, it supports multi-language and multi-currency. So then all your reporting will always come back to a core currency that you can do dashboards on. So you don't have to do all of those currency conversion after the fact. This seems kind of small, but in large organization with people everywhere, it's a huge deal. And again, 3 clicks, you're done. It's going to take you less development effort because you have the common data model. Something as stupid as the common data model can save you months of design and integration. Just trying to find a standardized definition of dates, time, between your NoSQL and your Outlook and your app, and make sure that they always use the good time zone and you don't have to do conversion between all of that. It's already embedded and it's shared across all the Microsoft products using the common data model between Office 365, Dynamics, and Power Platform as well. And you have accelerators. You can say, hey, we work in banking. Well, download the banking predefined model where you have people and the type of products for insurance and banking that is different from the people if you're in retail. That you can also download that accelerator pack and just like an app on your phone, you put it on your database. Again, these are the tips and tricks that will make that ROI work for you. You can share relevant data over multiple related use cases. A good example of that is if you do retail, right? You have multiple store locations. And then in those multiple store locations, there's multiple activities that happen. You have your sales activities. You say, hey, I have my people, they work in that store, and other people that work in that store. But once you've defined the store and the location of the store, you might have mapped some rooms and floors and whatnot. This is super useful not only for sales, it's also super useful for maintenance. So people that do disinfection every night and they need to do a proof of execution to say, hey, we're COVID friendly now, or we just changed our hand sanitizer dispensers. It's good for them. It's also good for your CFO because you know what? If those locations are well defined, then we can reuse some of that data to say, hey, what's our insurance policy is going to be like next year for all of our locations. So typically what you have done with traditional development, because you didn't have the role-based access control and all of that good stuff, you would have said, all right, I'm going to build a SQL database for my sales so my people can tag into their office or they start their shift and they say, I'm here today and I'm on which floor, which apartment. And then you would have built another database, maybe with another technology to say, hey, this is what we need for our COVID cleaning staff. And another database with maybe another technology to say, hey, this is what we need to view for our CFO so they can do those insurance policy measurements and whatnot, and multiple things. But if you combine all of that in Dataverse, you can share all those use cases on the same database. And because the security is strong and pervasive enough, you're sure that only people that should view certain data will, and then you just save 3 other databases, cost, TCO, and everything. You can connect multiple user experiences natively. Sometimes it's an app. You know what? Sometimes it's two apps. You have the front office and the back office view of things. You have a chatbot that needs to be transactional on the same thing. If you put the Dataverse at work, all those native APIs across Power Platform and beyond with non-Microsoft products, saves you again tons of time. And you can expand beyond Dataverse, because if you have to do analytics and advanced machine learning that goes even beyond what AI Builder offers you out of the box, send that to data flows, to Synapse. You can connect to APIs if you use like a third-party service to do your machine learning. You can have plugins, and again, there's the purview governance that is part of that embedded. So I think those 8 little things are probably the one that will generate the most value. And I didn't even went into the default things. Hey, it's easy to do choices, tables, and map and everything. But from an architecture or from an app development strategy, these are the strong enablers that will absolutely save you time. Let me see if we have questions on this before we move to the next slide. I don't have my dual screen today, so I have to look up on my phone. How's it going, Raz? Do you see lots of questions so far?
No questions yet.
All right. So my typical approach, when you start with clients, I mostly speak with clients, or I do my own project for Microsoft internally. It's hard to do, but as much as you can, do not start building an app now. Right? Somebody comes with an idea, and then your reflex is, hey, let's go build a Canvas app and build something. Don't do that. Start with a whiteboard or whatever you like, whiteboard, OneNote, piece and paper, whatever. Just start to do basic wireframe, or if you use a wireframe app, just do that. Start with a whiteboard and think of the experiences. And when you design your whiteboard, it will help you identify your data model very quickly, because if you design like a screen, you always know what the screen's going to end like, especially if you already have design guidelines by your organization, or if you use model-driven apps, which is the fastest way to build apps and the most secure one to build. You always have like the layer on top. You have like the header, footer, the business process flow, 3 different sections in a footer, right? And then when you put your fields in there, just put the name of the field and put, is it a lookup or a date or whatever, just like drawing on it, because it already starts to practice your brain for the next step. Once you've done that, with the technology you like, with the pen you prefer, or your mouse, then you can start to do some basic UML, Unified Modeling Language. This is just like a big word that just say, hey, what would my database look like in the background? So just design boxes with the name of your table and the name of the fields and what type of field would that be. And then you're going to have here a cluster for users, another cluster for opportunities, another cluster for your work sites, another cluster for your contracts. And then you can start to draw lines between those things. It doesn't need to be necessarily like documentation quality that Avanade or the Big Four would do. Just do it so your brain knows kind of what to expect. This is probably the one step that saves you tons of mistakes and oversights in your design when you start building in Dataverse. All right? Then create a new solution. So I know you're going to be tempted to say, oh, I see data in my menu in Powerups. Don't go there. Go a few steps lower. There's a thing called solution. Start in that solution, because that solution is the easiest way that you will have to fix some problems that you have, but also make your customization easy to move around from dev to UAT and to prod, like in a clean way. I know it's always tempting to start with the data. Don't. If you want to do something enterprise grade, start with the solution. It's one more click. The rest is exactly the same, but start with the solution. Then you start to create your data model. Now, once you're in your solution, you have option add a new table, and then you can add new fields or columns, and then you can start to add all your lookup fields, your date pickers and option sets and all of that good stuff. You create your data model. What I prefer to do first is, instead of going that deep, I only create all my tables. That's my approach. You can do whatever you want, but what I prefer, I only do the tables, and I only do the mandatory field that is the field of that table. The reason why I do that is that when it's time to create a new form that has lookups and then the entity is not there, you just waste a whole lot of time going back to the creating the entity. So create all of your entities from the start with the primary key field existing, and then go table by table. It saves me tons of time of back and forth. And also, quick pro tip, if you do a model-driven app, and if you put a field on a form that is a lookup, it builds the relationship automatically for you. So you don't even have to build the relationship afterwards. You might need to change it if you want some cascading rules and whatnot, but most of the time you don't. So you just create that field and pop, the relationship is created for you automatically. Then I go create my tables, my fields, and my option sets and whatnot. And I will often start with the model-driven apps, then the canvas. Model-driven app is probably the most underrated accelerator to save you money and time on a Power Platform projects. And when you think of it, it makes a whole lot of sense. Model-driven apps are the best back office apps that you can ever imagine. If you have a process that you have people in the field, it absolutely makes sense for them to have a Canvas app because they're task specific. They do the same thing every day, and most of the time they deal one record at a time. So then the Canvas app is a subset of field. You can make it look as pretty as you want, especially if you're in the retail or luxury brand in the store. This is what you want to do. But for back office users that need to manage all the people and manage multiple records at a time, they need to see calendars and stuff like that. Building that in a Canvas app will take you forever. And you're still going to be short of the features that your clients are requesting. Go to a model-driven app, much faster to build, and then you have all those different views, multi-select, graphs that are dynamic, and then you can select. That's going to save you a ton of time. So lastly, then as soon as I'm done with creating my model-driven app, I will probably build my Canvas app a little later, but I will create my business process flows if it's required, or this is where I'm going to start creating Power Automate flows that connect stuff that moves between tables since we are deprecating workflows, or that work with other systems, send stuff to teams from the Dataverse and whatnot. This is at that point that I'm going to start creating that. And the reason why I push it a little further down the road is that, especially when you build business process flows, there's so many fields you're going to be needing to say, hey, I did that to move to the next step. If you start your business process flow without those fields in your database, again, you're going to do a lot of back and forth sometimes, and it's a waste of time. So I try to push those as far as I can in the design process. And then finally, I will edit the security roles. Another pro tip, never start a security role from a blank page because there's so many intricacies in access control and everything. My best suggestion to you, start from the role basic user. You can make a copy of that business user and then go choose the privileges you want to attach to that user specifically, and then you can rename it to whatever you want. All right, are we going on time? We're good. Okay. So when choosing Dataverse, you have to think of two things. And the session just before covered that very efficiently. But I'm just going to add like a few things on that. There's functional consideration that will make Dataverse a good or a bad idea. And I think they touched on that very well before. The Dataverse is a transactional, structured database. It's not a data lake. It's not an MDM. What it's best at, it's being a transactional database that will document activities, processes, data, customer data, and or account data, and every other kind of in-between scenarios you can think of. But as long as it's transactional, I write stuff, I document stuff, and it goes out, it's great. Because if you start to do lots of calculation at the Dataverse level as a batch, for example, like updating, I don't know, doing calculation, risk propensity models that are very complex, all those rules they run on the Dataverse itself. And sometimes it might impact your performance. If you use it as an MDM at the center of so many other systems that will connect to your master data record for your clients and accounts and transactions or whatever, all those systems that connect to it will add costs to your operations. And this is kind of in between because there are such a thing as Power Platform request costs and stuff like that. You don't want to do that if you can avoid it. There's other solutions that are better for MDM, and also they have better data cleansing methodology tools to match addresses, rename first names with capitalize, and all of that good data quality stuff is better done outside of Dataverse than in Dataverse to make sure that you have a more performant solution. Second thing is Dataverse is great when security is important. And again, that's the key word. You need to define that data model, and you need to secure certain fields. For instance, I've seen so many people building stuff in SharePoint that they should never have put in SharePoint because the security model does not allow the granularity and scale that Dataverse offers to secure employee records, to secure claims record, because the way that the security model is built will always give you ways to circumvent that and see fields that they should not be able to see. So if you think that, oh, I built a SharePoint site and I built an app and they cannot attack the SharePoint site, they can, because they're authenticated to access that SharePoint site. You have to share that data flow or that data source with the end users. And it's hard to have true role-based access control in SharePoint, or at least not in a scalable way. The third one is multi-geo environment. This is super hard to do in SharePoint, and it takes forever to do it with other technologies like SQL and everything. So if you say I have users in Germany and have users in the US, and they can only see the data that reside in those things in their language with their currency, you use Dataverse for that. Don't use anything else. You're just going to waste time, or you're going to add an extra layer of complexity for your people to do your analytics because they will have to convert currencies all the time they want to build a dashboard. So these are some of the functional considerations. There's many more, but these are some of the big ones that will make a meaningful change in your app strategy. On the other hand, the financial consideration, there's storage cost. If you're in the low terabytes per environment, and I think it's a 4 terabyte limit anyway, but like as a tenant, if you stay under the hundreds of terabytes, or as soon as you say 100 terabyte or petabyte around Dataverse, maybe it's not the right solution for you. All right, that's pretty much what I want to say. So as long as you're within gigabytes or low terabytes count, there's a cost to benefit ratio that will probably be advantageous for you. But if you over high terabytes volume or petabytes start cleansing your Dataverse, probably you're holding up to data that is either irrelevant, not important, and if it is, use Synapse Analytics or whatever, or use ways to dump that in a blob storage that you pay as a platform, as a service on Azure. That's what you want to do. And the Power Platform requests that we used to call API calls, that's going to be something as well. We just announced that we almost doubled the quantity that we allocate to organizations. But again, if you put your Dataverse as an MDM for your ERP, your e-commerce and everything, you're going to see lots of action that will not only decrease the capacity or the performance for every other user connected to that instance, but also incur costs that you could avoid if you use the Dataverse where it's best. So, to summarize, just before we go to our Q&A, there's really 4 things I want you to remember when thinking of Dataverse. As most of you are business analysts, consultants, or whatever, this is typically the kind of people we have on these calls. Make sure you challenge and you influence every business requirements towards simplicity. If a client comes to you, say, hey, I want this app to do that, go build it. And you say, no problem. You've missed an opportunity to save them money and deliver value much quicker. Make sure to bring back as much you can into standard. Don't try to recreate 70, 80% of a model-driven app in the canvas, you're just going to waste your customers' time and money. I know your paid resources per hour or by workday, your time and material. I understand that. But here's a tip for you. If instead of building one app for a year and build top dollar for it, why don't you make 10? You're going to be as busy as one, but you will deliver much more value to your customer because this is the velocity of development you can get when you use Dataverse well, and then we influence the decision towards simplicity using model-driven apps for back office users and simplify Canvas app whenever is possible for the front-end users. The second thing that I want you to remember, don't waste your time building views, filtered views on the data layer, on the UX layer. And if you do, it's probably because your backend is SQL. Well, challenge that decision too, because if you say, I'm going to spend 3 months building a Canvas app with filtered views and everything to then use a SQL API with only a read-only or read-write that is then some middleware in there, challenge that decision, especially if it's a new project. If it's an existing SQL database that's been running and managed for years, it's harder, but oftentimes it's new needs. If they go to SQL in Canvas, challenge that, propose Dataverse and maybe model, or simplify Canvas. They're going to save time. It's going to be more secure, easier to govern. The third thing I want you to remember, maximize the use of model-driven apps. I know it's a premium feature. I know, but when you calculate the TCO, the total cost of ownership, that is divided by the build and the run, your build time on a model-driven app is tenfolds what it's going to be with a Canvas or with another technology. And yes, the run cost might be higher, but if you have a client that's already paying for premium Power Platform licenses and as Canvas app and Dataverse anyway, look at the need. If it looks like a model, go model. Save you time, save you money. They're going to have apps in weeks instead of months. And lastly, simplify your Canvas apps. And it touches a bit to the second point, is that if a customer asks you to put all those rules in a Canvas app, it's not secure anyway, because it needs to be built at the data layer. Because if you use public APIs, they are authenticated with their user and everything. They will always have way too much stuff they can see in that SQL or NoSQL database. And you will spend time building stuff for nothing. Simplify the Canvas app as much as you can. And also when you need to extend Canvas app, there's a cost benefit calculation you need to do between trying to configure something to hell or build the PCF out of it. So if you have development capabilities, use them when it's smart. So instead of doing configuration that is hundreds of lines of formulas in your formula bar, maybe go see the developer next door. Hey, can you put that in a PCF? Because then it's reusable much better, and use all the components in the PCF you can use in the Canvas app instead of recreating everything every time. So I think that those 4 tips will really allow you to deliver more value to your clients using the Power Platform, even if they feel it costs them money to run as a license cost. When you look at the number of apps that large organizations that have monetized for hundreds of thousands of users, they derive tons of value when they use it right. So I think, Raz, we have a few minutes left, about 15 minutes for Q&A. I'm going to go quickly through the chat, and let me just end the presentation here so I can see your faces. Here we go. All right, so let's start from the top. Raz, everybody's on mute, right? So if they raise their hand, they cannot unmute. Is that correct?
That is correct. So if they want to have a conversation, they just need to raise their hand and we can unmute them.
Okay, brilliant. So let me just try to here. I think the Dataverse solves biggest problem for any project UI framework. That's more of a comment than a question. I'm just going to go quickly through the comments just to make sure I can answer some questions. And if we all back, I'll come back to some comments. Dynamic C is built in React. That's not true. Pretty sure that's illegal, though. I don't know what we're talking about, Karsten, here. I guess there's legal ways to engage with Microsoft consultants. Oh, I don't think it's a question. Great advice, Kim. Very difficult to have Canvas app without a model-driven for sorting records looking. It's true. And Jorge, what you're saying is most of the time you will still end up with two apps because you will have a Canvas app for front-end users and another Canvas app for back office. That's stupid. Just go Canvas for front-end from front-end users when you can. If they, especially if they're client-facing, you want your branding and everything. But everything that is back office should and must be a model-driven app as much as you can. And these are the kind of requirements that I strongly encourage you to challenge. Rory, agree with the model canvas. If you can't make it work in model, at least from a relationship perspective, you'll never make it work in canvas. Yeah, it is it's challenge indeed, Rory. Mazar, Canvas app are evergreen supported in the same way as model driven. So Canvas app are supported just as the same way as Canvas from a product perspective. However, the supportability of it, you will have much more troubleshooting on your Canvas app than you would have a model. So it's just easier to fix a model than a Canvas sometimes. But use the test studio as much as you can. We have now in Canvas app. Use the solution checker to death. Use always that. These are the few things that will save you tons of time, Mazar. Eduardo, to see how it's understand, try to find courses on Dataverse CDS versus Powerups. Yes, I touch on this. Actually, I do the virtual training days for Power Platform, the P1, it's the PL100, the certification that is App Maker. I touch on this on the virtual training days, and I also share content specifically on that on LinkedIn on when to use which solution. For example, the delegation right in SharePoint might cause problems where Dataverse is better. And there's also something in between. Dataverse for Teams is pretty awesome when used well. It's very powerful. Your gay problem with model-driven, in my opinion, is that you may have to more flows than you in Canvas because you have patch, update, and other stuff in Canvas. Yes, and this is where, based on the role that the end user will end up having, most back office users will have enough triggers and actions and unload and everything in the model player. Of course, on model-driven are pretty difficult to find. This is one of blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so courses on model-driven, take classes on dynamics. It's the same thing. It's just a different logo on top. But if you're feeling a little on the Power Platform world, everything is about Canvas. It's true because historically that was one of the most differentiating tool. But if you want to learn more about model apps, take classes about Dynamics 365. That's going to help you a lot. Forward to Power Effects, columns, and buttons. Yeah, Power Effects. This is our new design language. Not design language. This is our new coding language or low coding language for the Power Platform. That thing is a beast, and it's open source. So there's more and more contributors in the community that will be able to use that and create stuff out of it. Plus, as Microsoft, we put stuff in there for Canvas, Dataverse is there, and eventually the other feature of the Power Platform will also be Power Effects driven. Where that's going to make the most sense, I don't expect any citizen developers to learn Power Effects, but when it's time to bring Fusion teams together where we have pro developers building components or advanced capabilities in VS Code or Visual Studio, they will most likely do it with Power Effects because they're just faster at coding than drag and dropping. And then we're going to have our citizen developer do the drag and dropping in the app maker experience. SharePoint is very challenging as far as security is concerned. It's cheap for a reason. SharePoint started as a document management system that then added lists. So it came at the same time as Access and everything. Access was the database solution and SharePoint was the data management solution. But SharePoint lists are awesome. I love them to death. But it's true that the way that delegation and security work doesn't match the needs of many enterprise-grade solutions. But it's a totally valid option. And I'd say that about 80% of all the apps built on the planet right now, they build out of SharePoint. I'd say probably 50% of them shouldn't because people didn't have the right licensing or didn't want the right licensing. But SharePoint is still bloody awesome. Don't hate SharePoint. Just use it well. So many cases where a customer built entire transaction system over SharePoint. Yeah, Eduardo, it's not because they did that it was the right idea. But I mean, ultimately, client will pay us all the money they have to use all the product we sell. sometimes we have to make some compromises, but education is important, and they need to understand that, hey, SharePoint is great at that, but not so great at this. And then we need to be there to educate them to use it where they should. Customers see it cheap. Yeah, SharePoint challenging, I guess, meant for those enterprise grade use case. It can, depends on the use case. If you have low volume, well, enterprise grade, listen, it's an enterprise grade client with a small use case, SharePoint is great. If it's a small client with enterprise grade needs, it's not so great. And if it's enterprise grade client with enterprise need of that use case, again, it's not necessarily always great. Use it where it makes sense. Since the Canvas app for those working in the field, yes. Back office on the mobile, as we all know, as model-driven app is also mobile responsive. Yes. And awesome offline capabilities that are coming to Canvas soon. Karsten answers some question for me. I know Karsten, I trust him. I'm not gonna challenge whatever he says. Rory, simplicity beats complexity every time. There's a sentence from the man, what's his name? The founder of Lotus. Is it John Cartham? Something. Anyway, when they design a Lotus, they say something. It says, simplify everything, then add lightness. That's amazing. We should think like that in more things in life, and that's exactly what you said, Rory. Simplicity beats complexity every time. You preaching to the choir, buddy. Karsten, remember you can build pages. Yes. I just want to find a question. You guys, I have no question. You just have comments. You just, I preaching to the choir or I'm dead wrong. Let's just see there. Containers for responsive design. Yes. Okay. People, stance, Canvas, elsewhere, Project Sienna. I don't even know what Project Sienna is. I think I heard it, but I'm not up to date on it. Canvas, pure citizen dev or front dev devs. Okay. So Canvas is not for pure citizen dev or front-end devs. There's absolutely valid use cases to use Canvas with pro dev in enterprise grade projects. There's no questions about it. It's just use it where it makes sense. It's the same reason why any chef have more than one knife, except in China, they do everything with one knife. But you have a toolbox. Canvas app is part of the toolbox. Use it on the use cases where it makes the most sense, especially when branding is involved, everything that is very task specific, one task at a time. You need branding, you're in the field or with a client. Canvas app will probably be model driven most of the time in this use case. I don't believe mass data management will really be achievable in Canvas. Canvas word for record. There's different ways to handle large data sets in Canvas app. But depending on the database that is behind, you will hit some delegation limits and stuff like that. But it can. Some of the things you want to do, and this is where using different environments or using different filtered views, role-based, might lower the number of records per app or per page that you need to load. That will probably help your Canvas app. But typically the loading time, if you're on a mobile, is faster in model than a Canvas, just the way it preloads and bring the information. And also the UI is a bit faster to load. Jorge, a couple of questions. Yes, at last questions, guys. Thank you. How is Convergence going? It's going. So I don't want to delve too deep into this. So there's a convergence of, we try to have model-driven app, Canvas app, and Portal be on similar design thinking languages, tools, components, and everything. It's going there. It's not where I want it to be yet. I'm pretty sure if you look at the last Ignite, I think Ryan Cunningham had an update on this. If you don't, I'll send it to this group. But the North Star is to not to have to choose ultimately between model and Canvas. But for at least the next 12, 18 months, this is still the conversation that we will be having. I'll be more than happy to update you more specifically on that convergence part. Should we expect more on it? Yes. Are there plans to make building Canvas with containers a bit simpler? Yes. We would have to speak with Ryan Cunningham and his team on this. It's tremendous amount of work. And also it's a big amount of work to work with containers between what you build in Teams and what you build for a mobile or like an iPad with the player. And also when we announced the new way to distribute apps as app packages, this also another way we need to make those containers flow a bit better because every phone has a different screen size and everything, and they react differently. So there's absolutely more that's going to be coming on that. But I don't want to mislead you. I'll let Ryan and his team talk on it. And I think we're just about time. Let me see if I see one last question. Powerups buttons in preview, yes. Canada is normally the first place to get these things. Testing environment, not always. It depends on which features. So, for example, we have some features that are in Germany in preview that we don't have here in North America or in Europe. So it moves. It often depends on where our target client is, because our clients, even if you might not know that, there's a lot of preview feature that we built based on a single client request, and we will test that feature in the data center region where that client is to make sure that it meets their needs, and then we'll open the private preview to more people, then the public preview and everything. Sometimes that has an influence as well. So it's just like a preview bingo sometimes. Pricing Dataverse is not really competitive. Dataverse is, again, one tool over another to Rory. So the pricing is one aspect, but again, think of functionality. I would not put Dataverse as a master data management solution. I would put that maybe in a SQL database with SSIS and DQS or other things or other technologies all up. Use the tool for what it is intended for. It's not zero cost. Nothing is ever zero cost. Agreed. Pay-as-you-go options also pretty game-changing. Yes, that's going to be cool. Pay-as-you-go will work with Dataverse as well. But again, just use Dataverse for what it is intended for. Delegation, model-driven apps also affected by this. In different ways, the way that they preload data between the model-driven and the canvas are different. The delegation is also very much impacted by the data source. So if you're in a canvas, you will have a different delegation a delegation rule between SharePoint, SQL, and Dataverse. So that mix and match is different. But typically, instead of the paging we have for records in Dataverse in model-driven apps, you can pretty much ask whatever record in whichever order in Dataverse, and it's gonna surface in a model-driven app. Powerups calculated columns available. We would have to look at the roadmap on this, Nicholas. Can pay-as-you-go Powerup get super expensive? Yes and no. So, and I don't want to make it a pay-as-you-go with 2 minutes to go. But pay-as-you-go is awesome for everything that is either early stage of your project or everything that is seasonal. I have tons of clients in retail that needs to have, right now, tens of thousands of users using apps in their store that they've trained since November to just for the Christmas season and Black Friday and everything. And then they're going to be affected toward the task, or they're not going to be in the company at all. So the pay-as-you-go for them, even if it scales to tens of thousands of people, it makes sense in the context of the seasonality that they need for that. But then where they're gone. So that pay-as-you-go model can get expensive for 3 months where they need that stuff, but then it becomes much cheaper than having to pay full year for 10,000 users that are gone after Christmas. So this is, again, different tools that we offer. This one is a financial tool to meet some business requirements your organization might have. So I'll try to stay connected on the chat to answer as many questions as I can. Raz, always a pleasure to be part of the gang. Super session. I'm glad to see all the questions and comments, and stay connected, everyone. Thanks, Raz.
Thank you, Kim. Always exciting, and is always interactive with Kim. So thank you once again for sharing your insight. Also, there will be a live Q&A with Ryan Jones after the next session. So that is another opportunity to get your questions answered. So again, thank you once again, Kim, for joining us today. And from one great session to another, we have none other than Manuela and Michael Ox, okay, who will be addressing the topic of the Centre of Excellence to